Please be seated. The court is now back in session. And once again, the floor is given to the prosecution to continue presenting their closing statement. You may now continue.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Honours, we last left off discussing the systematic pattern of killings of Khmer Republic officials, including soldiers, around the country in April 1975 to demonstrate the policy of the CPK to kill these officials. I would now like to move beyond April 75 and firstly shortly beyond and look at the evidence to see if that policy continued and to look at the evidence to prove and to show that that policy existed throughout the period. In fact, the policy to kill Khmer Republic officials from April 75 and before accelerated through the Democratic Kampuchea period as the CPK leaders' paranoia and obsession with eliminating perceived enemies became more extreme. An explicit piece of evidence that demonstrates this continued policy is a CPK military order that's been admitted at this trial. Military orders are powerful evidentiary documents. They are important because they evidence military structure, reporting, command and control, and of course the contents of the order, and in some cases the identity of the victims, if it's an order to kill. The 4th of June 1975, 6 weeks after the evacuation, military order is confirmation of this continuing policy to kill former Khmer Republic officials. This order was issued by Comrade Pinn, the commander of a Special Zone Brigade seconded to the party centre. The order was to execute 17 Khmer Republic military officers, and it stated that all these 17 persons have been examined by the party and the party has decided that they are to be smashed. It further states, the comrades are asked to implement this policy of the party, unquote. The policy of the party, on the 4th of June 1975. Your Honours, the authenticity of this order was confirmed by Yang Sari in his interview with Stephen Hedder. He also confirmed that the order required the Khmer Republic officers on the list to be smashed. Comrade Pinn, the author of the order, later was appointed the Secretary of Centre Division 703. Doik knew Pinn very well and has described the conversations he had with Pinn about the executions of officers and officials from the Khmer Republic. And I quote Doik, "I know that after the 17th of April, soldiers were systematically eliminated. This was confirmed to me by Com Pin, that's Khoem, Secretary of Division 703, and by Hor, my deputy. After the liberation, soldiers were hunted down and fled, unquote. Duch also said that Com Pin told him about the liquidation of specific named generals, and I quote, Generals Chia Kim Eng and Chim Chon reported to him to surrender and were liquidated afterwards. Hor told me the same thing about General Deng La Yom, also adding that the general had displayed great courage. Unquote. I would note, Your Honours, that the two generals identified by Duch, Chim Chun and Deng Ya Lom, are both on the list of the executed Khmer Republic officers that I previously discussed, the list that was published in Bangkok about a month later. Your Honours, the CPK policy to execute Khmer Republic soldiers and officials continued with full force and effect throughout the DK period. In the August 1975 revolutionary flag, it urged cadres to continue with their killings of the former Khmer Republic officials. And I quote, As for defending Phnom Penh and smashing espionage groups and smashing saboteurs that want to wreck and destroy our revolution, we will continue to smash the defeated enemy remnants to consolidate our victory. The minutes of a March 1976 Standing Committee meeting attended by Nguyen Chia and Khieu Samphan recorded that, and I quote, the entire feudalist regime has been permanently smashed, unquote. But, Your Honours, the killings continued unabated, particularly at S21, the notorious killing centre in Phnom Penh, and other security officers for which detailed records survive, cataloguing the arrest, detention, torture and killing of Khmer Republic officials. A news broadcast from May 1976 indicated that former Khmer Republic soldiers were still being executed in Battambang province. A July 1976 news report described the executions of 350 Khmer Republic soldiers who were machine-gunned en masse upon their return from Thailand. A March 1978 telegram from the North Zone Secretary to Committee 870 advises that, and I quote, in the dry season, the remained enemies re-emerged. We systematically purged them. Right now, some policemen, soldiers and government officials escaped after more than 20 people were purged. More actions will be taken to arrest more people, unquote. So, Your Honours, the evidence certainly proves that Khmer Republic personnel were killed all over Cambodia, in jungles, in fields, in houses, in ditches, everywhere they could be found. Based on his extensive interviews with refugees, most from the northwest zone who crossed the Thai border, but many from other areas, Francois Ponchot confirmed, and I quote, the accounts in question seem credible. They also confirm what was said about the massacres of civil servants and military personnel from the Lon Nol regime throughout the country. unquote. There was a consistent pattern, Your Honours, of luring large numbers of victims to their deaths with false promises and deceit. Killings occurred after a consistent scheme of recording biographies and segregating victims. The executions were planned and organised even down to the smallest detail. The apparatus and segregation and transportation, which started at the Ministry of Information at the Monorom Hotel, was mirrored all over the country. The CPK prided itself on its centralised and hierarchical authority structure and the high level of discipline amongst its forces. Nguyen Chia was not under any pressure when he admitted that the top leadership of the Khmer Republic regime was, and I quote, liquidated, unquote, pursuant to orders from the political leadership of the CPK. This is a highly damaging admission by him. Equally, Khieu Samphan cannot hide from his order to kill the 7 super traitors, nor the tone and content of the 21st of April 1975 congratulatory speech. We submit that the evidence leads you to one and only one conclusion, that the killing of Khmer Republic officials that took place throughout the territory of Cambodia before, on and following the 17th of April 1975 was carried out pursuant to orders of the party centre. Your Honours, if I can move to the evidence that proves the killings of at least hundreds of Lon Nol soldiers and civil servants at Tul Po Tre in Pasat Province in April 1975. This is another event that these accused are specifically charged with. Your Honours, the evidence shows that these killings occurred shortly after the CPK took control in Pasat. The massacre of these men, as you know, Your Honours, was not an isolated event. It was not an act of revenge. It was not an act caused by a rogue CPK zone leader acting under his own authority. It was an event embedded within a nationwide policy, the CPK policy to kill former Khmer Republic officials and soldiers, which I have just submitted. It was one massacre of many. It was a link in a chain of events. It was ordered from the top by the party centre. Your Honours, although the 3 witnesses, Lim Sat, Ung Chat and Samalat, who were called at trial, did not personally observe the killings at Tul Po Tre, they provided key evidence as how these killings were planned, organised and managed. I will briefly recount their testimony as it demonstrates how and why this massacre took place. You will remember the testimony of Lim Sat, who testified that a few days after the liberation of Phnom Penh, he attended a meeting where the Zone Committee ordered that the Khmer Republic soldiers and policemen had to be killed. He said the CPK were afraid they would revolt against them. He testified that the Khmer Rouge gathered policemen and soldiers of the Khmer Republic administration at a meeting at the Provincial Hall in Pasat. At the meeting, the attendees were advised that they would be sent to a study session. He testified that immediately after this, the police and soldiers were taken to Tulpo Tray, where they were executed. Lim Sat testified that his role was to guard the main road connecting the town of Pasat and Tulpo Tray, the execution route for the former Khmer Republic personnel. Here, Lim Sat saw between 30 and 40 military and civilian trucks take Lon Nol soldiers to the meeting at the Provincial Hall. Each truck held about 30 people. That same day, he saw at least 15 of the trucks transporting the Khmer Republic soldiers and officials to Tulpo Tray, 2 trucks at a time. He testified that there are about 50 to 60 Khmer Rouge soldiers at Tulpo Tray, and that he was informed via radio that the soldiers and police taken to that site had been killed. He testified to hearing gunshots in the background during the radio communications with the CPK soldiers at Tulpo Tray. When the trucks came back on the same road towards the town of Pasat, he said they were empty. After some trucks had left, Lim Sat was ordered by radio to release more trucks to go to the killing site. So, while it's true that Lim Sat did not see the killings with his own eyes, is there any doubt from his testimony that truckloads of Khmer Republic soldiers and officials were taken to Tulpo Tray and killed? Simply put, Your Honours, the only reasonable conclusion that can be reached based on the facts testified to by Lim Sat is that many hundreds of victims were killed by the CPK that day at Tulpo Tray. And Lim Sat, of course, is not the only witness to these events. You also heard the testimony of Ung Chat, who was assigned as a guard outside a meeting, where he testified that high-level Khmer Rouge leaders were in attendance. At the meeting, which lasted about 3 to 4 hours, he said the former Khmer Republic civil and military servants were told by the CPK leaders that they would be taken to a reception or a study session. Ung Chat's testimony is corroborated by one of the truck drivers who transported the Lon Nol officials and soldiers to their death, and who was interviewed by Tet Sambat in his Tulpo Tray film. That driver, on that video, stated he knew about the plan to kill these people, explaining that the passengers on his truck had been deceived and thought they were going to meet the prince. Lastly, Your Honours, you heard the testimony of Sam Alat, a Lon Nol soldier who testified that he was present at a meeting where Khmer Republic soldiers were told they would be taken to Tulpo Tray for a reception with Angkar. Fortunately for Sam Alat, the trucks were so crowded with others from the meeting that he could not climb on. So, although some of the details contained in the testimony of these 3 witnesses may have differed, the core events relating to the deaths on a mass scale of the former officials and soldiers are well established by the testimonies combined. Proof as to the exact method and manner of death comes from eyewitnesses and physical remains left at the execution site. The personnel were executed en masse with no ability to defend themselves. Their hands were bound. They were tied together in groups and shot. TCW 644 stated to court investigators that he went to the execution site the day after the killings in April 1975. And he saw bodies with gunshot wounds to the head and torso. He stated the victims were tied together by rope with their hands tied behind their back. Ung Chat testified that he was told by villagers that the corpses were bound at the arms and tied in groups of 15 to 20. A Khmer Rouge cadre on Tet Sambat's video, who was present at the killing site, he stated that when the Khmer Republic officials got off the trucks, they were told their arms would be tied because they were meeting the prince and were not fully trusted yet. He stated after being tied up, they were taken behind the raised bank of a nearby pond and killed. Another CPK soldier in the same video also confirms that the victims were tied up before being killed. One of the cadres in the video demonstrates how the victims' hands were tied together, 20 bodies per piece of rope. As to the actual proof of death of the former soldiers and officials killed at Tupo Tre in April 1975, that proof is significant. A local farmer in the Tet Sambat video stated that the morning after the executions he saw the bodies, describing them as stiff, with sounds of decomposition emanating from them. Another witness on the video stated that shortly after the killings he saw the bodies bubbling like molten tarmac. A local ox cart driver gave evidence to court investigators at E35234 that about a month after the killings he saw traces of excavators that had buried all the corpses. TCW 699 visited Tulpo Tre after January 1979 and saw piles of human remains with Khmer Republic Army uniforms next to 4 or 5 big pits that had been dug up. Another witness who gave the OCIJ statement E35500 went to Tulpo Tre and saw many bones sticking out of mounds of earth. Your Honours, even 35 years later, OCIJ investigators were able to find at this site bone fragments, fired cartridge casings, a bullet head, metal artefacts such as belt buckles, zippers, and the presence of clothing in the soil. These cartridge cases were found in and around the burial pits. Your Honours, as to the numbers of men killed at Tupo Tre, the testimony of 3 witnesses heard by this chamber establishes that between 200 and 500 people were transported by trucks from the Pasat Provincial Hall to Tulpo Tre that day. Other evidence before Your Honours suggests a far greater number of victims. TCW 644 stated that he saw up to 1,000 bodies. TCW 699 told investigators that the pond near Tulpo Tre was full of corpses, estimating that there were approximately 5,000. The CPK cadre from the smashing unit interviewed in Tet Sambat's video stated that there were nearly 10,000 people killed at Tupo Tre. Confirmation of the existence of the pond near Tulpo Tre was done by the ECC investigators when they visited the massacre site during the judicial investigation. The comprehensive report corroborates the testimony of the witnesses that such a pond existed and it was of a size that would hold thousands of bodies. This slide is a photo from the report that shows the pond where the Khmer Republic officials were killed and their bodies disposed. The next slide is a detailed map from the crime scene report showing the pond, which is seen by the GPS points forming a circle at point 3 on the map. You can also see at points 4 and point 5 the route in which the trucks took to get to that pond before they were executed. Your Honours, the crime scene investigators were left in no doubt from their examination of the execution site that the location identified to them was in fact the site of the mass execution. They in fact concluded that after interviewing witnesses and examining the site, I quote, "The Office of the Co-Investigating Judges has not found any evidence so far that any event of a similar magnitude happened after the killing in 1975 at the particular site of Tulpo Tray," unquote. Your Honours, the exact number of deaths that occurred at Tulpo Tray on that day in April 1975 will never be known. What is known, however, and what has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, is that hundreds of Khmer Republic personnel, truckloads of victims, were taken to Tulpo Tray and killed in April 1975. Your Honours, I've made a number of references to the video One Day at Po Tray, which was produced by Tet Samba. This video corroborates the trial testimonies heard by this chamber and the statements given to the ECC investigators. To finish, we would like to play a short 8-minute clip from the film to demonstrate the powerful corroborative nature of this evidence to the trial testimony, witness statements and other evidence before you. Your Honours, the video will take about 8 minutes.
At that time, everyone, all the royal soldiers, wanted to see the prince because they wanted to get promotion. So the one who was not an officer also bought the officer's stripe. This is what I want to say. That's why a lot of people died. Some people were not the real soldiers, but they bought the officer's stripes from the market. There were plenty of officer stripes selling in the market at the corner of the Busat River. Along the corner of the market, they were selling the officer stripes all along the way. During the incident, they still sell the officer stripes until the third day when money was abolished that they stopped selling it. They told us at the meeting in the evening that we must wake up at 4 a.m. and gather to attack Tulpo Tray. We woke up at 4 a.m. Everyone was there and we got into the truck. We traveled from Busat and arrived at Tulpo Tray at dawn. At that time, Commander Clem announced on the loudspeaker from the guard post to arrange soldiers in our unit and local Units 18th and 19th, almost 1,000 soldiers to cordon. Our group called Preventive Unit. They told us any incident that any targets escaped from the smashing unit. Our preventive unit must take all necessary measures to catch them back, or our plan would fail. Around 7 a.m. we heard the sound of trucks coming, the big truck coming first. And they told us that the special unit be ready. On the third day, they drove people to Turputre. We already was aware of the circumstances that those people were taken away and killed. They were all the important people. They knew they were just going away for a few nights at the most. After meeting with the prince, they would be back to their old position. They just said that, and they did not worry about anything at all. They were teasing each other. What are you packing along with? They were in civilian clothes. The provincial governor wore white with a straw hat. They tried to look ordinary because Khmerus wore black with scarf on their neck. So they also tried to look like farmers. They wore like an ordinary with a straw hat too. They make fun in the track to create relaxed atmosphere, which seemed like nothing about to happen in the future. After they got off the tracks, there was an announcement that, "Comrades, do not be afraid. You come to meet Angkar, not because Angkar does not trust you, but you will meet the prince, so we need to tie you up." After they were tied up, all the people in the trucks, they walked them away. It was like this. They shot one here and then another. One by one, they fell down. The brain was scattered. The white brains mixed up with the red blood, which looked so horrendous. They did not shoot them in the open, since people on the tracks would see it. Only in the ponds that they could not see the killing when the tracks coming across. Some of them even shouted out, cursing, "You godless devils, you animals." As soon as they saw the dead bodies, they started to curse. But others were struck dumb and could not even walk. When I come here, I feel as if the killing is happening right now. At first they wanted to hide all of them in a pond, but it was not big enough. First they asked them to kneel down and face their direction. Some shredded by the bullets. It was hard to watch. The stench of blood was too strong that I could not stand it, so I moved away. It was better if you were on the upwind. Did you walk along here? In the morning, the corpses were only in the pond, and when I woke at 4 p.m., there were corpses scattered everywhere. east, south, north, all scattered with corpses, all the places. I walked fast by the fence where they packed the trap. So did you wanted to walk this way? This was covered with all the corpses, so I could not walk. So I walked at that direction instead to rejoin my unit. I asked the unit and 3, the one who shot those people, that how many soldiers were killed there. He told me there were nearly 10,000. How many bodies did you see here? A lot. There were a lot that I can't say exactly. But I asked the Bol, who did the killing, who was assigned in the special unit. I asked how many people Bol. He said there were some 10,000 or maybe only 1,000 less than 10,000. Please speak louder. Whom did you ask after the shooting? I did not ask at the shooting place, but I asked him when we were back at the canteen for lunch after we transferred back to the province. I asked Bol, how many deaths since it scattered everywhere and I was outside so I could not see? And he said, according to what he did, at least 8,000. Maybe only 1,000 less than 10,000.
Mr. President, Your Honours, we submit the evidence before you in relation to the extermination and murder of former Lon Nol officials and soldiers is extensive and reliable. You have trial testimony establishing the key facts and events relating to the murders, witness statements providing further specific details, corroborative forensic evidence from the court investigators. In addition, you have compelling accounts of these events from the actual Khmer Rouge cadres involved in the killings, who admitted the commission of these crimes in the One Day at Portray video. Your Honours, the evidence also proves that the executions at Portray in April 1975 were committed pursuant to a policy of the CPK leadership that targeted former Khmer Republic officials and soldiers. Lim Sat specifically testified that his regiment commander told him the order to execute at Portray the Portray victims was issued, and I quote, because they're afraid that these policemen and soldiers would revolt against the Khmer Rouge, unquote. This was exactly the reason Yang Sari, a member of the Standing Committee, gave to Steve Hedder for this policy. And I quote again, that they, the CPK leadership, decided to do whatever was required to keep that group from being able to rise up and oppose the revolution, unquote. Khieu Samphan himself has stated in a prior interview that the CPK leadership feared that, I quote, remnants from the Lon Nol army throughout Phnom Penh and the countryside, unquote, might be involved in a rebellion. Your Honours, the killings at Portray were not isolated acts of revenge, as argued by the Nguyen Chia defence, nor were they the crimes of an autonomous warlord who ruled the Northwest Zone. The executions at Portray like the similar executions that took place at other locations across Cambodia, were the results of decisions made and policies established by the party centre leaders. Your Honours, if we can pause for a moment, I would like to move the prosecution's submissions away from proving the criminal policies of the CPK, away from proving the crimes that resulted from those policies, and towards the issue of Nuon Chea and Khieu Samphan's responsibility for them. Their individual criminal responsibility for the criminal policies and crimes which are charged in this trial. Your Honours, the evidence shows that behind the charm and smile of Pol Pot were the minds of a small group of men, including Nuon Chea and Khieu Samphan, who were prepared to do whatever it took to realise their radical vision of their Cambodia. Nuon Chea and Khieu Samphan and their criminal partners were the masters, and the Cambodian population were their slaves. They were dictators who controlled Cambodians by brutal force and fear. Tragically, their act of stripping a population of all of its humanity by the abuse of power of a few has not been a first in world history. Totalitarian dictatorships through the ages have used people as tools to enable them to gain and maintain absolute power and absolute control. They do so in order that their vision, and only their vision, can be realised. Nuon Chea and Khieu Samphan killed for power. They spilt blood for it. They brutalised and dehumanised their own people and kept spilling blood for power. There is nothing beautiful about this blood. It represents agony, anguish, fear, and death. It tells us of victims shot, bludgeoned, tortured, starved, and worked to their death, often in unimaginable pain. It marks the loss of meaning in life. It represents the ever-aching hearts of Cambodians, of Cambodian parents who never saw their children grow. The ever-aching hearts of Cambodians whose mothers, fathers, husbands, wives, boyfriends, girlfriends, brothers and sisters that never came home. This blood they spilt also represents the ugliness, the obscenity, and the inhumanity of the act of killing another human being. It represents the work of the killers. The young men ordered to kill their neighbours. The blindfolding of victims, the tying up of their hands, the digging of pits, the beating of bodies, the smashing of skulls, the burying and the cleaning up. The work of butchers, human butchers. This blood is bad blood and cannot be the standard by which we live. When you torture someone to death, you have to get close enough to your victim to inflict pain. But although that closeness allows you to kill, you also see the eyes of the victim, the fear in the face and the disbelief as to what is happening to them. When you prepare a victim for death, you see their eyes. When another human begs you for their life, you see their eyes. When you wield a club, a bar, and hold it high above your head, you see their eyes. Seeing your victim's eyes makes it hard to kill. As if you look close enough, you see yourself. You see your own humanity in their eyes. Nguyen Chia and Khieu Samphan chose not to see the eyes of their victims. They chose not to see their own humanity. This made it easier for them, more humane for them, by urging, persuading, and ordering others to do the work of killing. If they saw their victim's eyes, they may not have pulled the trigger, swung the axe, tied them up, or dug the pit. So they got others to do their work, their very dirty work. They contracted out the inhumanity of their work so they could feel more humane. All for their vision, their unrelenting, unforgiving vision of creating a society that they wanted. They used Cambodians to kill Cambodians. They used Khmer to kill Khmer. They played with Cambodians' minds and their bodies. They played with them like pawns on a chessboard, causing many to kill and millions to die. Whether you would kill or be killed, they would decide. Your Honours, a man who we will now see on the video reminds us of the tragedy, the anguish and the pain of one victim, and the barbaric and savage nature of the work of her killer. He reminds us of the loss of our humanity and how it can happen. He makes us think, where should the blame for these tragic killings really lie? If we can play the video, please.
Can you recall what this woman has asked you? She had a small, thin face. It was small but long. Her complexion was white. She was pretty. She was a seamstress. She stayed indoors, so her complexion was better than ours, who worked in the fields. She worked indoors and she looked beautiful. Yes, she was in the last batch to be sent. She grabbed my leg screaming and asking me, "Uncle, I beg you, please let me live with you." Then I said, "How can I let you live with me? Because you are about to be, and you can't stay with me." She said, "Please, please, whatever happened, please just let me live with you." Then I said, "Will you live with me for the whole life? If you just stayed here for half of your life, you are not allowed." Then she said, "Yes, I will stay with you for my whole life." She raised her hand like this and hugged my knees and shouted to me, You, what are you waiting for? Start doing your job now." Then I started doing it. I do not like it, but I did it. And by pushing her down to the ditch, yes, it was a tailor from Battambang at that time. When I got home, I had to wash my hands thoroughly. I ate a little rice, then I stopped. I smelled my hands, and they smelled of blood. At the killing site, the stench of the blood was terrible. It was worse than the beef flesh. But we had to get on with it.
Mr. President, Your Honours, the blame for the death of that young girl lies with Nguyen Chia and Sampan and the other CPK party centre leaders. It is clear in this trial they are only charged with the killings arising out of the forced transfers and the killings at Tulpo Tray. But it's not clear if this young girl's death arose out of that. What is clear is that for the killings and inhumane treatment for which they are charged in this trial, they are to blame. Blame because they created the killers through their policies, their orders, their indoctrination and their training. To blame for without their criminal plans, that girl begging for her life and millions like her could be alive today. Mr. President, I would now like to move to the evidence to show you why both Nguyen Chia and Sampan are to blame, why they are legally responsible for the crimes charged in the indictment. Mr. President, it perhaps would be a natural break to break here, or alternatively, I can keep going. I will continue.
The President. Well, you may move on to the new portion of your statement. Of course, you are allocated with 3 days for this final statement, but yesterday you have already used your time allocated. So I suggest that you proceed now so that you will save the time for your subsequent statement.
Thank you, Mr. President. And to understand how Nguyen Chia and Khieu Samphan participated in these crimes, it necessitates an understanding of how they agreed to the criminal policies of the CPK, how power and authority was exercised in the Communist Party of Kampuchea, and what roles they had within the Communist Party of Kampuchea, and finally, how they individually contributed to these criminal policies and crimes. I will address the evidence relating to these issues under 3 broad headings. First, the collective leadership, guiding principles, structure and communication of the Communist Party of Kampuchea, the role and character of the accused, and finally, their contribution to the criminal policies and crimes charged in this trial. Your Honours, the evidence you have heard over the past 2 years has proven the role of Nguyen Chia and Khieu Samphan and a small group of leaders of the CPK who formed what was known as the Party Centre. The evidence has shown that Nguyen Chia, Khieu Samphan, Pol Pot, Yang Sari and Sun Sen lived and worked together, that they made decisions together on a collective basis, and that through a hierarchical command structure and strict regime of reporting from the bottom to the top, they exercised complete totalitarian control over all of democratic Kampuchea. Every zone, sector, ministry and military division reported to the Party Centre. And every single aspect of life of the people of democratic Kampuchea was controlled by the party leaders. Where you lived, what you did for work, who you could marry, what you could eat, what you could say, and even what you could think and believe. Democratic Kampuchea was a slave state, and its masters were the leaders who ruled over the country from the K1 and K3 offices in Phnom Penh. In our opening remarks back in November 2011, the co-prosecutors discussed extensively the role of the Party Centre. Your Honours may recall when it was Khieu Samphan turned to respond to our opening statement. He accused us of making up the term Party Centre. We would like to quote him exactly and play a video from the courtroom on the 23rd of November 2011 when Khieu Samphan made the following comments about the prosecution's use of the term Party Centre.
I have noticed that the co-prosecutor has invented the word Centre the Party. I have heard it since Monday and Tuesday. I am concerned that you are using these words in order to distinguish clearly between the Central Party and Standing Committee, because this disturbs you. However, at that time, there was a clear distinction between the two. Therefore, you want to have the public believe that everyone is like one rotten fish in the basket. But it is a lie, an exaggeration of the fact.
Apologise, Your Honours. The evidence in this trial has conclusively proven that it was not the co-prosecutors, but rather Khieu Samphan, who has attempted to deceive this court. You have now seen many contemporaneous documents from the DK era that expressly refer to the party centre, Mochim Pak. We have identified numerous references to the party centre in the Revolutionary Flag and other CPK publications by this chamber. To give you just a few examples, a speech that was given by Nguyen Chia on the occasion of the 9th anniversary of the Revolutionary Army of Kampuchea and published in the December 1976, January 1977 issue of Revolutionary Flag, they used the term party centre 11 times. In the April 1978 issue of Revolutionary Flag, announced that the party centre had discussed and decided that rice yields of 8 tonnes per hectare could be, and I quote, fully done with 10 to 15 years throughout the country. Stephen Hedder testified that the reference in the Revolutionary Flag to a June 1974 meeting that decided to mount the decisive offensive to liberate Phnom Penh was to a conference of the party centre. And a CPK circular titled "What is the Anchor's Ideology and Party Discipline?" It summarises the CPK hierarchy and organisational principles as follows, and I quote, "The individual must respect and comply with the organisation. The lower echelon respects the upper echelon. The entire party respects the party centre." Witnesses we have heard in this trial also have referred to, described and identified the group known as the party centre. Pol Pot's nephew, Saloth Ban, described Khieu Samphan as a member of the party centre. Yan Kim, a long-time CPK commune chief in Krache, who attended a meeting at which Nguyen Chia provided instructions on the implementation of cooperatives, testified that Nguyen Chia was with the party centre, so he was at the supreme leadership level of the CPK. Both Song Sakun and Nong Sapang described Office 870 as the party centre office. In his book, Voices from S21, David Chandler wrote that the collective leadership was known to outsiders as the upper organisation, Angkar Lu, the organisation, Angkar, or the upper brothers, Bong Kang Lu, but was known to members of the CPK as the party centre. Chandler also testified during this trial that the party centre included both Nguyen Chia and Khieu Samphan. In an interview Nguyen Chia gave to a Japanese journalist in October 2006, Nguyen Chia was asked, "Who decided to evacuate the people from the cities?" And his response was, "The party centre." So, Your Honours, the party centre was most certainly not a term invented by the prosecution. It was a very real group of men who ruled democratic Kampuchea, two of whom are sitting in this courtroom, and one down below. It is not surprising, however, that Khieu Samphan feels uncomfortable whenever discussing terms like the party centre, for it is this group that its true power and role can be seen. For the evidence has proven that Khieu Samphan was one of the very few CPK leaders trusted by Pol Pot and Nguyen Chia who allowed him to be by their side at all times. In the words of his own wife, who brought to this court to testify on his behalf, Khieu Samphan and the other top leaders of the party were, I quote, "close to one another constantly," unquote, during the war years of 1972 to 1975. This brings us to another remarkable lie that was delivered by Khieu Samphan in this courtroom. On the 30th of May 2013, in response to a question posed to him by a civil party, Khieu Samphan denied that he was a leader of the DK regime and claimed that he had joined the Khmer Rouge virtually by accident. Khieu Samphan, who continues to cling to an image of himself as a person of integrity and honesty, asked this court and the public to believe that he joined the Khmer Rouge by accident. But Khieu Samphan was neither an accidental or reluctant member of this organisation. Whatever it was that led him to the Marquis and the CPK territory in 1967, Khieu Samphan seemed to like it there. He didn't stay just a week or a month or a year. Khieu Samphan stayed with the Khmer Rouge and willingly served as one of its top leaders and the public face of the party for nearly 30 years, defending its murderous policies and advancing its agenda. Your Honours, throughout, just one more paragraph if I can. Your Honours, throughout my closing argument, I will be addressing the lies and deception of the accused that we have seen during this trial, because their lies speak volumes about themselves. They reflect their consciousness of guilt and show us their true character. Men who stood in the courtroom and told preposterous lies, denying their roles, knowledge and involvement in these crimes, not willing to have their stories tested when the time came to face questioning from the chamber, the prosecutors and counsel for the civil parties. Mr. President, probably a natural break there.
The President, the time is now appropriate for lunch adjournment. The chamber shall adjourn now and resume at 1:15 today. And this is the information for parties to the proceeding and members of the public who are observing the proceeding. Security guards are instructed to bring the accused to the holding cell downstairs and have them return to this courtroom before 1:30.